allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
A reminder that this is public and being aired right now for your viewing pleasure at home. And if any of us here want to look back, let's start with some condolences. Condolence for James R. Toby upon his passing on 13th November 2018. Mr. Toby served in the United States Army during the Korean War. Also, our condolences to Mr. William O'Melia upon his passing on the 19th of November 2018. Mr. O'Melia served in the United States Marine Corps with combat engagements during operations on the Pacific island of Palau in World War II. Forgive me if I didn't pronounce that correctly. I'd like to have a moment of silence for those two gentlemen and others who have passed. Thank you. Approval for minutes of the previous meeting.
Motion to approve.
Motion made, seconded. Those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Moving on to announcements from the President. Here's an announcement, 26, Christmas on the Common for 2018. Christmas on the Common will be Sunday, December 2nd, 2018 from 12 p.m. to 4 p.m. in the Bridgewater Town Common. Bridgewater Council will be, Common will be closed to north and southbound traffic from 10 to 5. We anticipate a huge Christmas on the Common event. Moving to proclamations, seeing none. Time for Citizens Open Forum.
I saw that, Sam.
Hi, Carlton Hannity, Austin Street Master Plan Committee Chair. Very quickly, I'd like to hear a little bit more during the discussion period tonight from you folks, what the committee you appointed at the last meeting dealing with downtown revitalization. I'm not real clear on its role, given that I'm as Master Plan Committee, that there's a number of committees that are already engaged in that, particularly the the Comprehensive Master Plan Committee is forming next month, I believe. We have our first meeting. I'm just curious how the interface, the charge, how does that work with all the other committees that are going on that are working on this same downtown issue? So that's just a quick question. And with the unfortunate passing of Tom Hall, the Master Plan Committee and also the Energy Committee are shorthanded. I would like anybody that's interested in those two areas of interest in town to please step up. We have openings due to Tom's unfortunate passing. Also, I just wanted to remind everyone that the branding and wayfinding consultant will be coming here on December 13th, 6 o'clock in room 201A to present the work that he's come up with the advice of an ad hoc committee in terms of wayfinding. This is an important part of the 2014 Towntown Revitalization. That's the second thing that they suggested in that plan, that we needed to brand ourselves better for a number of reasons, especially to have a constant image that people can see in terms of the town of Bridgewater. So those are the three things I wanted to just mention tonight. And again, I just would like to hear a little bit more on that other committee that you formed and how it's going to interface. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other citizens for Citizens Open Forum? Hearing none. Moving to hearings. No hearings. No license transactions. Zero presentations. Now.
Mr. President, in respect to our state rep's time, I know there's an open Q&A, and I'm sure he doesn't need to sit through the town manager's report. So I'd make a motion to take item J out of order. Second.
Motion made and seconded. Those in favor of the move?
Aye.
Was opposed? Moving us to item J, discussions, which we move to a open question and answer period with State Representative Angelo Emilia. Hello, sir.
Thank you, Mr. President. Councilors, is this where you want me?
That would be good.
Well, thank you for inviting me this evening. I am honored to be here. So, and Councilor Fitzgibbons, thank you for taking me out of order. I greatly appreciate that.
No one needs to sit through a town manager's report.
I'm sure he'll forward it to me tomorrow so I can review it. But no, it's great to be here. I didn't really plan anything other than the Q&A. I guess I can touch a little bit on my schedule, my upcoming schedule. Now that the last election is behind us, I'm looking forward to being sworn in for my 5th term early January at the State House. But prior to that, the consensus revenue hearing for I can't believe I'm saying this, the 2020 budget cycle begins on December 5th. So I'll be at the State House at the Gardner Auditorium as part of the Ways and Means Committee in hearing from economic experts on what the projected growth is of the state and put our best foot forward on what we look to have for additional revenues to build the budget for 2020. So with that, I guess I'll open it up to questions, Mr. President.
Any of the folks have any questions? There's a microphone we provided on a microphone stand back there. Of course, if any of our council have any questions.
But,
Citizens first, I'd say.
yeah, I think that would work.
And please do introduce yourself, name and address. Thank you.
My name is Richard King. I live at 545 Conant Street. I'm not sure if this is a matter for Representative D'Amelia or the town council, but I'm interested to find out if there's any plans on repaving the south end of Conant Street, because it's turned into a shambles, and it just gets worse year by year. I've lived in that location for 28 years, and the street has just gone downhill every year. It's kind of the forgotten end of Conant Street. Am I doing this at the proper time, or discussing this?
I would defer that to the town manager.
Perfect time.
Yeah, like I was saying, I've lived there for 28 years, and the population's increased. It's the end of the street is blocked off by a gate going towards the prison, so it's more or less of a dead end road. So a lot of people don't realize how much traffic we have. Every weekend there's soccer. We have a lot of traffic coming down Conant Street. They park into the state field for soccer tournaments. So that's every weekend during soccer season. Every day there's police from various towns coming down Conant Street to use the shooting range in the same location, that state field. And most of the policemen have big pickup trucks. There's a caravan in the morning and then another one in the afternoon when they leave. That's pretty much every day, and the street is just getting beat up. And my house, both sides of the road during heavy rainstorms, it's underwater, and it just leaves like a few feet of asphalt in the center for people to drive on. It's totally flooded on both sides. There's no drainage. The closest catch basin is up near the intersection with Flag Street. South of that, nothing. Just runs off into people's yards or down the side of the road. And then in the spring, this town comes by and they throw some tar on it and drive the truck back and forth over it a couple times, and they just keep patching the patches. But the street is really, it's an old country road that's outgrown itself. And no, I'd be interested to find out if that's in the plans. I've heard from one person.
I think we've got a couple comments from the councilors, so might have some input. Mr. Woods?
So before we get to the specific nature of the question and the town manager's response, maybe I can rephrase it into a more generic statewide question that the representative can somewhat address. I know not fully address, but the town itself has grown from, I don't know how many miles of road back in the 70s to like 235 now. And Chapter 90 money from the state is critical for infrastructure all throughout the state. So from a state point of view, is the state taking a look at expanding Chapter 90 monies for infrastructure, and will towns like Bridgewater that have roads like, as the gentleman just described, be able to access a specific grant or specific element of the program to help out troubled roads?
I don't know about specific grants that are upcoming, but I know that the Chapter 90 funding is always something, an important topic up at the State House, because not only here in Bridgewater and obviously Rainham that I represent, but across the Commonwealth, we're all competing for those funds. And I know we had a bridge project that needed some additional funding, and I was able to secure a little bit of funding to help with some of the repair work that was needed throughout the town, where they could apply some of that. It was a $50,000 addition that I put into the budget that they allocated towards that bridge monies that they had allocated, so they could use it in other areas. It's up to the superintendent and obviously the council to help organize, what roads take priority. But it's something that we will continue to look at, and I'm always looking to increase funding for Chapter 90. Hopefully that answers your question.
It did. Maybe town manager can address specific.
I'd be happy to. So I think you put it very well. That street is a country road that's sort of outgrown its country-ish nature. So Chapter 90, what this town, Bridgewater, has done traditionally is rely completely on Chapter 90 funding for almost every part of road repair and reconstruction. Chapter 90 funds really are designed for maintenance, of existing roadways. They're not designed for the use that we have put them to. It's not an illegal use by any means, but it's really designed for maintenance of roadways. We've used it to completely rebuild roads because we have no other source of funding. So one of the things that the council asked me to do is do a comprehensive road assessment and come up with a plan to address, presumably the worst roads, and then work our way through a whole host of roads that need help. Well, virtually every road in town needs some level of help. So we did a complete. We're just wrapping up a complete review of those streets and of all the streets in town, putting it in a report format with pictures and graphs and so forth, and we're going to grade the condition of each road, and then go from there. Try to seek funding from a number of sources. The state has a formula that they grant us Chapter 90 funds with, so that's a formulaic issue. Our state rep was able to secure a little bit of additional, I call it off-budget funding, to offset some of the repair work that we had to do on the bridge off of Bridge Street there. But Conant is on the radar. I don't know exactly where it is in the ranking with the highway superintendent, but we can certainly find out, and I can give you a little more guidance. We generally try not to identify specific streets that are going to be subject to repair too early because, for instance, we wouldn't try to identify those streets right now because we don't want to tell you that Conant Street's going to get repaired in the spring and then have a complete failure like we did at Bridge Street over the winter and have to devote all of their Chapter 90 funding to that one repair. So that was a particularly egregious case that sucked up really virtually almost all of our, well over half of our Chapter 90 funding. So we don't want to tell you that we're going to tackle Conant Street next spring and then have that happen and then have to push it off for a whole other year.
I understand that. Yeah.
But I can tell you it is on the list, and as I say, we're about to chew off a big, or at least present to the council a big repair project plan that they can then wrestle with.
Right. Several years ago, the north end of Conant Street was repaved. So when we saw that happening, we thought maybe they'll keep coming. But I think they stopped at Winter Street.
Yeah.
Anyways, thank you.
We know.
Mr. Gallagher, do you have something to add?
Just quickly about, I don't want to, I'll reiterate a little bit of what the town manager said. I do know exactly what you're talking about on Conant Street, because I do jog down there when I take that route. But I will say this, it's not the worst street in the town. There are many others in a lot rougher shape, although that particular area you're talking about does need some improvement. But even the stretch of Flag Street, the stretch of Winter Street that I'm on before I get to 18 is pretty bad too in certain areas. But there's a lot in the town. As the town manager said, there's a process. We only have so much money per year we can allocate towards road repairs, and there's a priority list out there of what needs to get done. The state does a good job at appropriating Chapter 70 funds, and they just appropriated a supplemental amount for us, which I think we got like 170,000 or something like that. So, that's not going to do a lot for a big road, but we understand what you're saying. We've heard it from many other residents in other parts of the town, and but I know what you're talking about. I go down there, but it's not the worst.
Mr. Fitzgibbons?
And just to turn it back to the state rep, and just to give you a suggestion to go back and think about, if the main reason, it sounds like, for the deterioration of this road is it's a dead end, it shouldn't be being used that much, except that it abuts land that the prison has that's being made available to the public through the soccer association, which is great, and and for training police officers, which is great. But that might be an issue to go back and look for a couple more dollars for mitigation for the prison from doing that, providing that.
That's a good suggestion, and as you know, one of my top priorities is that prison mitigation fund that when I was first elected wasn't funded any longer. It has been a priority, but now that you brought that suggestion up, I'll focus in on trying to get a little bit more funding to the prison mitigation.
Just a thought.
Thank you.
Excellent. Other questions from citizens for our state representative?
Sam Baumgarten, 60 Short Street. I guess I have a two-part question about funding for higher education. I'm probably aware, you're probably aware, we all are, that funding over the years for higher education has gone down. The percentage of funding that students pay has gone up. So I'm wondering what your take is on the current state of funding for higher education. Do you think we should be doing more? And the second to that is there's been an agreed upon contract between the state college teachers and the state, which remains unfunded. So I'm wondering if you're paying attention to that at all right now.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm aware of that funding issue with the professors. It's something that we've been grappling with, but percentage-wise, I think the funding has increased over time, but it's something we have to look at and do definitely more with our university. I think it should be one of our top priorities. So I'm in agreement, but there are a lot of categories when we're up there building the budget that are competing against one another. So obviously, we're a host community to Bridgewater State University. It is a priority for me personally. So I hear you.
Mr. Fitzgibbons?
If I could follow up on Mr. Baumgarten, because as the state rep knows, my father was a professor there for many, many years. And I remember a lot of times in the 70s and 80s when we had, my father was expecting a raise and didn't get one because it was subject to funding. And to me, that's an important issue. If you negotiate in good faith, you should fund the contract. And so I'm just telling you that's my opinion.
Thank you. Other questions for Angelo D'Amelia?
Good evening, sir. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you very much. I've got two sort of state-level general things and one, it's a more local one. Chapter 70 is, and that's the school support, right? K through 12. Where do you see that going in the future? Bridgewater's in the middle of this new build. We're growing like wildfires, if I could use that term, unfortunately. We're growing like crazy. The school population's getting bigger. We need more Chapter 70 money. Where's the state going in the next 4 years with that? That's that's question one, and then I'll hold, and then I'll ask two more.
There was a foundation budget review committee that put some legislation forward. Unfortunately, it was put to the conference committee, and at the last minute, they weren't able to come to an agreement. It's something that we definitely look at, like Chapter 90 funding, Chapter 70. It's top priorities for not only myself, but most of my colleagues up there. I mean, it is a priority, but there are a lot of competing interests up there. But I think over the last 8 years, you've seen Chapter 70 funding increase year over year. Could we do more? Obviously, I think everybody would like that, but it's something we look at on a regular basis, and we'll continue to look to put more money towards Chapter 70.
So you don't have any, I won't say real or firm, but some level of projection of increase?
Well, like I said, on December 5th, we'll have the consensus revenue hearing, and we'll try to come up with a number on what the projected growth is, so we could start to try to factor in what the percentage of growth will be over FY 19's budget. And I'm sure some of that projected revenue will be put towards Chapter 70.
And that's formularized, basically what towns get. It's under a formula.
Yeah.
Is there any thinking about changing the formula to take a town that has so much state property in it?
The Foundation Budget Review Committee made some recommendations, but they couldn't come to agreement in the conference committee, like I had mentioned earlier.
Okay, so you're not sure?
I'm not sure, but I know that we'll be looking to always try to increase Chapter 70 as a whole.
Thank you. Thank you. As you may know, I chair the Energy Committee here in town, and we've got some projects in the works, some very new, some are stalled. State incentives, I think, are very good for the alternative energy incentives. Can you speak to that in terms of the future for those kinds of incentives and where we're going over the next 4 or 5 years?
I can't say specifically what those increases or what those could be, but I mean, I think here in Massachusetts, here in the Commonwealth, we've set our agenda where we want to continue with renewable energy and put a focus on that. And I think we're doing a good job. Specifically to the projects you're talking about, I'm not sure what they are.
Yeah, they're just solar fields that would do community solar, hopefully, which is you're familiar with community solar, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so the public knows it's a way for people that may not own their houses, they may rent, but it's a way for them to get alternative energy through the national grid system. So it's solar fields that they sell off parts of it basically, or rent off, so you can get lower energy costs. Usually it's around 10%. And we're very high on some of the fields that are trying to come in and do that. Very quickly, same kind of story and concern with Community Preservation Act funds. I know there's been some changes in the fees, but there's also the need for the state to supplement that. Have any thoughts on that?
I know we haven't been matching the funding to where we committed to, obviously. I think the last go-around we were at 17%.
Something like that.
If I'm not mistaken, I think it was right around there. I mean, I've co-sponsored legislation to support and bump more CPA match funding for a number of years. So obviously, where Bridgewater is a CPA community, I'm on board with that. Again, there's a lot of competing interests. Everybody that's brought up a question of where the funding should go right now, the CPA, Chapter 70, Chapter 90, they're all valid points and they're all things that are important. But that's part of building these budgets. You can't. If it were up to me, I'd give 100% match, but that's just not a reality right now. But 17 is not probably good enough at this point as well.
Thank you. Well, we encourage you to keep pushing hard for those things. Last one's a little bit more local. I know it's near your old stomping grounds on High Street. State, with NGO, started a process to look at a dam on the town river up by High Street. I believe there's probably a likelihood that dam will get removed. The removal of that dam has a cascading effect that the state would say that if it's gone, then we have to replace the High Street Bridge, which is a very old stone bridge, very busy bridge. And because the state was the advocate for the removal of the dam rather than finding historic preservation money to preserve it and get the fish, use other technologies to get the fish up the river, which is their driving concern, because of the state's the driver behind this, Are we going to be able to really push the state hard to get the funds so the town doesn't have to come up with 5.2 million?
I mean, that's something we can work on together. I mean, you know, it was the fact that the state advocated to remove the dam that has the impact on the bridge. I mean, I think it only makes sense that we can try to make an argument that the state should be responsible for the replacement cost of the bridge.
And where would those, what would be the approach for the funding? It's going to be a budget item? Does the town have to
Be a
apply
budget
for
item,
it?
I could potentially go right to DOT and see, you know, where they're at on these type of projects.
Can you work on with that with the town manager? I know he's mentioned it, but I'm quite concerned that the $2 million repair removal costs the town $5 million. It's by the way, it's a privately owned dam, so the owner has made his mind up or will make his own mind up. But the state's the one that pushed for it.
I'd be happy to work with the town manager on that.
Thank you.
Excellent. Mr. Fitzgibbons.
I'd just like to follow up on something that Mr. Hunt said, and again, put another bug in your ear, State Rep. That's why you're here. That's why we're trying to do this stuff. And I see a
Well,
couple
happy
friends
to-
from the school committee here. He mentioned Chapter 70. We need to fully fund regional transportation. We need to fully fund that. Thank you.
I think you're aware of the fact that on numerous occasions, I put in for 100% funding.
I know that. I'm just putting it out there.
But keep putting those bugs in my ears. I appreciate it.
Other questions for our State Rep?
You want to go first, Bill?
I've already asked, go ahead.
Right. Well, I have a couple, so I'll ask my first one and then
I have three, go
I'll
ahead.
send it over to you. Actually, a couple things. So to reiterate what Tim had said about specifically around regional school transportation reimbursement, keep me honest, Ms. Holbrook. My memory is that in order to have towns or multiple towns, give them an incentive to regionalize, one of the things that was stated was we would get 100% transportation reimbursement, which is 35% of the district's budget, roughly 35%. So people could say 80% is good, but I would like for you, just as a favor, to remind the legislator that we're not just a singular town looking for more reimbursement. We actually went into this with an expectation of having 100% reimbursement. And that 20% is a very large figure in our budget. So I'm not expecting you to say it can happen, but I know in those budget talks, everyone's looking out for themselves, but I think us, other regional districts, have a little bit more, I would say, skin in the game because of what we've done. And to be quite honest, 80% isn't good enough. On top of the regionalization, we also have transportation expenses that we're mandated to satisfy for the state. We can't say no, other towns being equal as well. So I would hope that that is a recurring theme when we're looking at reimbursement. So I put that out there as an ask.
I agree with the council. I think, promise made should be a promise kept, but it doesn't always work out that way. But that's one of the reasons why in the past I put in budget amendments asking and requesting 100% reimbursement of regional school transportation. And those colleagues of mine that have regional school systems, we're fighting the fight up there.
Okay, thank
But I
you.
appreciate that.
Nope, good. Second thing, prison mitigation.
Hold on a second.
I'm
You
sorry.
said you were going to pass your next question.
No,
on.
because
You can have that.
it's not going to be the first time I lied. I'll ask the second one and then I'll hold off on the third one because I think I know where you're going, Bill. On prison mitigation, it's great to get it back and I appreciate all the work that you've done for that. What I'd like to see is more prison mitigation coming to Bridgewater's way. I just don't understand how, I think we got about 240,000 in prison mitigation,
I think it was 280 and change.
280, and Walpole gets around 770.
I don't like that either.
Okay, so again, an ask is, can someone just explain to us the mythology of why basically Walpole gets $500,000 more than we do? So I'm, again, just putting it out there.
It's a flaw in that prison mitigation funding formula,
Right.
and it's something that I will continue to work on, trying to rectify.
Yeah, because as you're probably aware, we're struggling coming up with our budgets as well. And I think over the years, We have been, and we being even people before me and others have been very fiscally responsible, but we're at a point now where we have to generate or identify more recurring revenue in order for us to support all of the infrastructure that we have. So prison mitigation obviously would be one, getting more for the transportation for the district. I mean, that goes strictly to the district, so that helps us with the allocations they look for us as well. So that's it, Bill.
Real quick, though, I appreciate the fact that you don't put it in as reoccurring funding, because as you can see, over the last 8 years that I've served, 2 of the years it got 9 seed. So I commend council and the town manager for not counting on that. I mean, I don't want to say it's found money, because it's something, it's a top priority with me, but it's smart not to count on that all the time, because it seems to be, if revenue shrink and the governor has to implement his 9C authority, it's something that seems to be gone after.
I understand where you're coming from that. Personally, I would disagree at that in regards to, I mean, I'm going to be facetious here, but state aid can't always have state aid in regards to the levels that we have, yet we budget for what we expect. I think if we can expect mitigation, we can budget to that and still be fiscally responsible.
Well, you can expect that I'm going to put it in every year. I'm actually taking over the lead as the lead sponsor on that amendment, so, but I understand what you're saying.
Great.
Thank you. Couple items of concern that I don't think the council can take action on. Maybe you can take it back to the State House. Spam calls are a nuisance to everyone. And I read what the FCC is trying to do. I don't think the council here can take any action on it, but is there, and you don't have to answer this right now, but is there something that the state can do to reduce the number of spam calls, phone calls to people's houses?
I know there's been some legislation floating around out there, and I think there was a piece, I can't recall off the top of my head, that was put forward. I don't know what the status is on it at this point, but
okay.
It is a nuisance. I agree with you.
The second one is a public safety issue. I've had a couple people ask me about specific intersections and the traffic lights, but it had nothing to do with the traffic lights. It had to do with the fact that the person first in line was texting and missed the fact that the light turned green. I know in other communities, and New York and other states, they have hands-free and they have other laws. I know we have laws, but it doesn't seem to be widely enforced about mobile texting. Is there something that can be made stronger there so that people drive with fewer distractions?
Well, to my knowledge, it's illegal to text and drive at this point now. We have that on the books.
Yeah.
But it's got to be, I agree.
Move to West Bridgewater, Mr. Wood.
That's right. Okay, fine.
But on 24 and 93 into Boston, in my 2-hour trip back and forth, there's not a day that goes by that I don't commute to the city that I don't see people driving and texting.
Right. I'd like to expand on Mr. George's question about school. I have read about special education, transportation, tuition, that sort of thing, and it's not a privilege. It's a right. We have to educate all of our students, and some students need additional help outside of the normal scope of what the schools can offer. And some schools, like BR, do offer exceptional programming. But the state doesn't do a sufficient job at reimbursing the school districts or local schools for those services, even though some are mandatory, some are enhanced, and some are just need to have. And I'm wondering if the state could move closer to full reimbursement. So it's not that the individual 351 towns and cities take on the burden of the residents, but that it's a shared responsibility across the state to educate the students in a fair and meaningful way, whether it's in their hometown or whether they have to go to another location for that education.
In a perfect world, the state would fund all their mandates, but I don't have to tell you all. We don't live in a perfect world, and it's just something we have to continue to advocate for. But I promise that I will continue to advocate for that additional funding for special ed and regional school transportation, anything that has to do with education. We want to increase that Chapter 70 funding. So, again, we don't live in a perfect world, but I will continue to do my best.
Thank you.
I do have one more.
You do have one
But
more.
I want to make sure everyone gets a chance.
So we'll exhaust the room, and then if the room's done, then we'll go back to Mr. George. Go ahead.
But before I ask the question, I was remiss. I want to say thank you very much for coming. This was kind of my idea to bring, I was hoping for both our rep and senator. I'm glad you're here, don't get me wrong. So I appreciate you coming in and taking the time. One of the recurring things that I think that we hear is around people's voices being heard, and I think we do a very good job of listening to voices, but it's great to have you here and listen to our voices as well as the public as well. So I do have one last question. Help me understand this, if you can.
I will if I can. No
So-
guarantees.
Recreational marijuana. We have spent an exorbitant amount of time trying to get it right for the town. Can you explain to me what the legislature's methodology was of having two different ways of determining if recreational marijuana was going to be zoned in a town? Can you explain why there were two different ways?
I'm not sure I understand.
So if a town voted yes, for the local, it would go to a town-wide vote. If they voted no, it would be up to the selectmen, the town council, to determine the zoning.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah, why two different ways?
I think it was a way that they could provide local option. I think that was something they were trying to consider. Whether it worked out that way, I'm not sure that it did. But I think that was the gist behind it initially. They wanted to give that local option component. So I think that may be part of the reason.
I like the local option component. I don't like the two different ways of doing it. It really brought, in my personal opinion, a lot of angst on at least this group around trying to get it right. And I think we did per se. I mean, that could be up for argument. But I personally really think that the legislature did us a disservice by not making it across the board throughout the state, one way to determine it at the local level instead of having two different ways. But
I see your point.
Okay, thank you.
Excellent. Other questions amongst the council? All set? Any other folks out in the audience have anything to ask our state representative? Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Great to have you available and
Appreciate
open.
it.
Good night.
Excellent, thank you.
Thank you.
We should have had dial-in,
What's that?
phone-in questions.
Yeah. So although one of the answers that did come from the town manager seemed like the town manager's report, we'll go back to item I now.
Don't we have to complete J?
Oh,
Yeah,
was there a
let's
second
finish
J? Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Keeping tabs on it there. All right, so discussions. We've got a scheduled January 8th joint budget meeting for the town council, town manager, school committee chair, or designee. We need to get that scheduled for advertisement. Correct? No. What are you saying no for? No advertising needed. Just get it scheduled. Get it done.
Our regular
So
meeting day?
I'd make a motion to do that, but make sure we invite the school committee chair, the designee. I'd rather have as many school committee people as possible. If they can make it on January 8th, that would be great.
So the school committee, as many as we can get.
As many, I mean, it should be a meeting for them, and frankly, the superintendent, too. I mean, the more the merrier, in my
Yes.
opinion.
Can I get a positive nod for that? Now we move to item C, a
Can we
discussion.
ask, can I ask? Didn't Tim make a motion?
I made a
I'm sorry.
motion to set the
Yeah.
date for January
Gallagher second
8th
that?
for the joint meeting.
So that's been made and seconded. My apologies. Those in favor?
Let's discuss, can we discuss a little?
Yes, we can. If you must. Discussion.
So the-
Mr. Gallagher.
January 8th is one of our regular scheduled meetings of the council, all right? I just hope that, when we've done this every year, and to me, it always seems to be a waste of time. So I'd like to see something come out of the meeting, like a preliminary budget message, if you will. I know we're not going to have any state figures at that time. We may see the governor's budget later in January, as we usually do. But I'd like to see or hear, when we send the letter to the schools, what are their priorities? I think we got that last month a little bit as to where they might go, but I think it's fair to say that we should have the entire council at least see some of the things, that the issues the schools are going to need for fiscal '20. So we come out of there, either saying, geez, how are we going to get there, or have some ideas, and to just leave the meeting saying, okay, the budget's coming, we'll deal with it one-on-one. But, and I know we still have that subcommittee or ad hoc committee going as well. So just to try to have some concrete ideas from that meeting. That's what I'd like to see come out of it, that's all.
Other comments?
I'll just comment if I could. So I always looked at that meeting, because we've been doing it for years now, kind of as a strategy meeting, a high-level meeting, not one to get into the nitty-gritty of positions on highway department and things like that, but where do we want to take the joint effort of, all the departments of school, police, fire, and whatnot, and move it forward for the town? What are important for strategic objectives, and where do we find or know about gaps? Because we've been doing budgeting for a while now, so where do we have challenges and that sort of thing? And that's the type of discussion I was hoping to hear each year.
Mr. Fitzgibbons.
I'd just like to piggyback on to Mr. Wood and realize I didn't ask somebody who would probably be very, very important to be here, and he could do his presentation on where he thinks revenues are, where he thinks expenditures are going to be for both the town and the school. To the best of his knowledge, I'm sure the school has better ideas on where their revenues and expenses are, but at least for our purpose, he may have stuff. So obviously we'd invite the finance director, Mr. Salmonte.
Agreed. Any other discussions, comments? Okay, so those in favor of scheduling this for January 8th?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Now, Mr. Gallagher, discussion on Rainbow's End.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring this up to my colleagues here on the council, as I know there was an article recently in the local paper about Rainbow's End Playground, and a few people have reached out to me, and I'm sure they might have reached out to some of you guys as well, as to what could become of that, and perhaps even in the town manager's report after this, he might give us an update on what's being done to remedy the toxic level of what's ever in the wood down there and so forth, and I guess I'd like to get some ideas from the council as to, I know it's not our land, but I believe that the state will allow us to use it for some sort of recreational reason, I believe, once the issue of the contamination or whatever is done down there. But I have talked to a couple of people, and I don't know if anybody has been approached about making it another playground, but some have suggested that why couldn't we use that land for a dog park? I know that's been thrown out there for several years in town, and I'd like to work with a group to see if that's a feasible location for a dog park in the town once we remedy the situation of the contamination. I know recently in a few of the capital budgets that have been presented, there was about $40,000 proposed for a potential dog park. I know it's not budgeted, but it's an idea that's out there, and there is a foundation out there I think you can apply to, as long as you have have land and so forth. So what I would like to do, and I hate to get involved in social media banter on an issue, I kind of just let it ride and read the comments, but I may reach out to a few of the dog park pages that Bridgewater has to see if there's any interest in people that are on those sites to get together to talk about the feasibility of that. I just wanted to throw that out there to the council to let you know that I might do that. Unless there's been other groups in town that have approached either of you or the town managers to, this would be a good use for this property, if we have permission to do this. So I just throw it out there that that's where I'm kind of heading. I think that the Crescent Street Playground has been very well used by the youth in the town, and perhaps this may be an ideal location for a dog park, which has been talked about for a long time.
You know, we had a state rep here that might have been able to answer, taking a little bit, something back to the State House about that piece of land and how they could help.
Mr. President, if I...
Yes, you may, sir.
I would just like to say I appreciate Councilor Gallagher's comments with respect to consideration of the idea of establishing a dog park. I think that would be a useful pursuit for the town. I'm not sure that the location of Rainbow's End would be necessarily suitable for that purpose. If at all possible, personally, my hope would be that the site could be remediated and could be restored for use as a playground, as was intended. The town does have the Crescent Street site, but of course, this is several miles away, basically on the other side of the town from that, and I think that for a town of our size, the notion of having two public or quasi-public playgrounds is not excessive. I think we could populate them, as it were. I think they'd be very well attended. The real issue, of course, really is learning about the status, not only on the question of contamination, but the status of the legal status of the lease, and I know that's something that the town manager has cited in the past and is probably going to inform us about tonight. I paid a visit to the playground on Sunday, and it had been many years since I had taken my children there, so I hadn't been there in the interim, but I was very surprised to see the state of disrepair and neglect in which that site now stands. Certainly, I think that to more or less commemorate all the efforts of those 600 volunteers, some almost 30 years ago, I think it would be wonderful if the site could be brought back into a state of repair. But those are just my comments initially right now.
Thank you. Mr. Souza.
We keep hearing about the contamination. Has anything been done to come up with a cost of cleaning it, or back up a little bit, what it would take to get it cleaned? I mean, we've talked, I've heard this for a couple of years now, okay? And I think the only way we're going to do it is we have to come up with some kind of a beginning, like what is really there, what would it really take, then what would it cost, okay? Depending on what it really is, you could even go back to these volunteers if it's properly handled with someone who's certified to do that, depending on what the contamination is. If we're only talking pressure-treated lumber, look around your yard. How many of us have it? We handle it. We touch it. When it first came out, they built picnic tables out of it. Okay? So how bad is it really? What's happening into a lot of this stuff is they said it was going to last you forever, but it's starting to rot. That's what you got to look at. And it could be that all we really need is to get some volunteers and a couple of roll-offs down there and just pack everything up and get rid of it to a proper place. But we don't know. We don't really know. Maybe the suggestion would be is if the town manager could talk to our building official. He may have something or a source of information that he can draw from to come back with a plan of what we could do.
Thank you, Mr. Souza.
Would you like me to
Add to this discussion, yeah, that'd be great.
add to the discussion? So I have not had the opportunity to read what the article that came out, but I can tell you that that there's a bunch of different issues swirling around Rainbow's End generally. We have somewhat conflicting, I shouldn't use the word conflicting, but differing opinions about the contamination levels that exist there. The town commissioned a study probably about 13 years ago that found that there were acceptable levels of arsenic, which is a component of the treatment process, as Councilor Sousa pointed out. And then we have other...
Was there an acceptable level of old lace?
Of what?
Old lace. Only the older people know.
Oh, God. Terrible. No, but I'll ask for some funding to do some testing. But we do, so that is one issue that we have to look at. The other issue is the safety of the area. The police chief, many years ago, not so recently, but many years ago, did point out that the location is not ideal given the heavy underbrush that shields that playground from both the soccer fields and the street for most of the year. And he didn't feel that was he felt that was a safety issue. One that could partially be ameliorated by clearing away some underbrush, but not completely. The other issue, I think, as one of the councilors pointed out, is that we've got some conflicting documents that question who really does control it. Keep in mind, the town never, to my knowledge, never actually expended money on the construction of that facility. That was all fundraised and then installed, as Councilor Gallagher pointed out, by volunteers. There is an act of the legislature back in 1968 that grants the town some ability to use that for open space purposes. There's a lease document that was executed in 1978 directly for all that property that's currently being used, leased directly to Bridgewater Youth Soccer. And then there was, when I came on in roughly 2015, I guess I got, must have been 2013, I got another extension of a license agreement, which is the way that the state currently, quote unquote, leases its property. They do it through a licensing agreement. So I signed that just because it was a matter of routine. And then a couple of years later, found out that there was a conflict between the license, which grants the town the right to use it, and the lease, which granted Bridgewater Youth Soccer the exclusive right to use it. So we're trying to sort of sort those out. My guess, if I were to take a wild guess, is that there's probably no resolution to that particular issue, and that it'll take some agreement between Bridgewater Youth Soccer, the Department of Correction, and the town to try to remove the pieces of Rainbow's End that definitely need to be removed, and then to look at a future use, and whether that's use as a dog park or use as a scaled back playground. That certainly can be up to discussion as we move on. But the most pressing thing for us right now is really identify who actually controls it, and barring that, me sitting down with the representatives of Bridgewater Youth Soccer and the DOC and try to come up with a cleanup plan for that property. And I suspect that that's where we'll head.
Ms. Loesch?
So with that being said, Mr. Town Manager, would you be able to commit to having those two things done by April 1st?
A lot's gonna depend on the resolution of, or at least the analysis and recommendation on the legal issues, and that I may be relying on the state legislative council at the State House, and I wouldn't want to begin to figure out how this would go up there. But I would, honestly, I would like to resolve the issue. It's been sort of out there for, well, since at least the early 2000s as an issue, but we do need to resolve it. So I don't think I can actually commit to April, but I can commit to bringing all the parties together, that's for sure.
Yeah, so if that could happen, at least a conversation. So for the first April meeting to have an update on it. To your point, it has been pending for many years. So if we can have regular touch points on the topic, then we'll be able to move it forward. So that would be great. Thank you.
Yep. Other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gallagher, for bringing that forward. Great discussion. Now to the town manager's report.
Let's be really short now.
I've got a report.
Please excuse me.
I've got a report on. Is everybody going to leave? Yeah. Well, I don't have to report on Rainbow's End right now. I will let the council know, and a little heads up to folks that live on Elm Street or off of Elm Street, that we'll be having a neighborhood meeting on December 11th right here in the council chambers at 6 p.m. To go over the overall rebuilding plan for Elm Street. VHB, the engineer for the project, will be on hand to answer all the questions, and they'll have some pictures of what Elm Street will look like once it's done. It'll look roughly the same. It'll just be in a much, much better state of repair. It'll also have a sidewalk on one side and curbing and so forth. So folks that are interested are certain. Everybody's welcome to come out. We're sending mailings out directly to the folks that actually live on Elm Street. My informal poll of counselors tells me that most of the counselors would like to see some sort of later service in the evenings. If you recall, I had asked, I think 2 weeks ago, just to let me know if that was something that would be beneficial, and most of you have. Also, I will bring with me to the advisory board meeting this week the recommendation that, if possible, some service between the quiet hours of 8 p.m. and 10:30 p.m. would be helpful, so that people that just missed the 8 o'clock train don't have to sit for 2.5 hours waiting for the next one. We are looking at paid parking program going live the first week in January. I will re-emphasize and clarify that we are not including anything in Central Square for paid parking, and that will be the same as it always has been. Paid parking will be on School Street. It will also be in the town lot and also in the Spring Street lot. Those are the only areas for right now that we'll be doing that. Also on the parking front, winter parking hours will be coming into effect on December 1st. So as everybody here knows, but I'll remind for public benefit, there's no overnight parking December 1 to April 1 to accommodate the clearing of streets on what has become a regular basis. Hopefully not this year, but has become, snow has become a regular thing in recent years. Just a very quick update. I think Dr. Hunt already covered this, but Thursday, December 13th at 6 p.m., there's a open working session, so folks can come and see the work of the Branding and Wayfinding Committee, who's been working with a consultant to come up with essentially sort of a logo for the town. Ultimately, we'll use that as we replace our signage, certainly our wayfinding signage, and I've been holding off before putting up some sort of signage in front of this building to get a consensus logo so that we can sort of unveil it at that point with that sign. We've been working quite hard on a 5-year capital plan, and we anticipate the 2019 to 2025 plan to go in front of Budget and Finance just for discussion purposes before it comes to the council for review and adoption. But that is underway. That will also include the actual capital spending plan or capital spending proposal for 2019, and the the years out will be included so that you can at least see what we're facing. I can tell you that our 2020 budget process is well underway. The 2020 budget process starts in my office the day that you actually vote the prior year budget. So the 2020 budget process really started probably last June, and we work on that. It's hard to work on the 2020 budget when it's actually 2018, and you're in the middle, about to go into FY19. So for a period of a few months, I have no idea what year it actually really is, but we figure it out. I can give you an update on Skips Liquors. Skips has filed for a renewal application, and they are now for their regular standard renewal application this time of year, which is routine. They have chosen not to request a change in name and not to request a change in hours at this time. In terms of their building, they're still in front of the planning board for modification due to issues that are reflected on their site plan, which aren't built according to the site plan that the planning board approved. So planning board wants to hear more from them about that. I'll give you a quick update on the Mitchell School Building Committee. The committee actually met last night, and I can tell you that the feasibility phase is on time and within budget. The committee is currently reviewing 3 different options as sort of directed by the Massachusetts School Building Authority. One option is repair, one option essentially is renovation and addition, and then the third option is replacement. And by the the end of January, the committee will likely narrow down the options and decide on what's referred to as a preferred design concept, and that's a concept plan which is then submitted to the Massachusetts School Building Authority for approval with, I believe, their February, March, April meeting, somewhere in there. So that what gets submitted is referred to as the preferred schematic report. So that is underway, and the committee sponsored several public sessions, which actually had very good turnout. One was, I believe, at the high school, one was at the library, and I'm not sure where the third one was. But they did have pretty good. Where was it?
Golf course.
Oh, the golf course, of course.
Golf course.
So they had good public turnout and had very good questions. And so the committee is going to work on sort of taking those questions that were asked, turning them into frequently asked questions, and making sure that hits the website, a link to which is on the town's website. So if you want up to date and up to the minute information regarding, or as up to the minute as possible information regarding the Mitchell School Building Committee progress, there is a link right on the town website, and as well as a link on the district website, and you can get right to it. So let's see, that I can tell you, I mentioned it earlier, Street Scan is almost complete with their road and sidewalk assessment. We're a little off the schedule that I had promised due to the delay in the appropriation, but we should be able to get the report and the plan in front of you at the either the 1st or 2nd December meeting, and move on from there. Just my last plug that I make it all the time. We do have openings on Conservation Commission, Open Space Committee, Water and Sewer Board, Master Plan Committee, Energy Committee, Board of Health, among some others. And anybody that's interested in any of those subject areas is certainly welcome to come and talk with me or reach out to counselors or committee chairs and get an idea of what the committee service is and how it works and how satisfying and rewarding it really is. So that's what I have for right now.
Thank you, Mr. Dutton. Questions for Mr. Dutton? Mr. Wood.
Thank you. The first question is about the Mitchell School Committee. So when the town voted to possibly spend $800,000 on a report, where's that money going? I had a question earlier. that they thought that a consultant was coming in from the state and would analyze things and then produce a report, but now it sounds like the committee's doing most of the work.
I guess the best way to answer that is well, two ways. One is fortunately for us, and I think all the towns in Massachusetts School Building Authority changed, or the state legislature changed the way the MSBA worked. The MSBA gives out very specific guidance to cities and towns looking to do school projects. So there's a very predictable schedule, very predictable amount of documents and work that have to be done in order to qualify for state reimbursement, state funding. So one of the things we do when we voted the money, we were voting essentially an appropriation that would cover the cost of an owner's project manager, which is required, similar to what we did with this building, and also the cost of an architect or designer. State calls them designers. So the work that they do gets us to the point where we know what we want to build, and we are at that point going out and asking residents to fund what we as a town have decided that we want to build there or renovate or make addition to or whatever. So the state doesn't actually provide doesn't actually come and do the work. The state provides funding, and the state also sits on the selection panel where we select the designer. So that's the state's involvement. Out of the 800 that we have voted, we will get reimbursed roughly 55%. So we've appropriated $800,000. The voters have approved that. We will end up spending roughly somewhere less than $400,000. That makes sense.
Thank you. I'll come back later.
Okay, Mr. Gallagher.
Getting back to the paid parking program, which I'm not in favor of, but having said that, the lot behind the town hall, I believe in one of the capital project phases that I've seen, there was money put in there, which hasn't been approved yet, but just as an idea to redo that back lot. I haven't been back there since Music Alley closed in the fall, but I know that it hasn't been, repaved or anything to that level. But is it workable for the lining of the spots and everything for? I know you're not going to put meters there, but there'll be a kiosk in the corner somewhere. But has that been planned out?
That has. If you go back there now, the highway department, roadways department has done a lot of clearing of brush and cleaning up. They swept a lot and then relined it. So it actually has much more identifiable spaces. And we did the relining pursuant to a plan that Larry Silva had done for us to sort of maximize the parking without overly congesting the area. So it looks better than it did. Okay.
The highway bond on Spring Street, I know we've been waiting for a contamination study to come back to see if there's anything there. How are we with that? And have we sought out any estimates to have it torn down?
Answer is yes to both of those. Unfortunately, it looks like it's going to cost something north of $100,000 to abate the structure of I think it's mostly asbestos in the structure. We're still waiting on the report, the 21E, for the actual ground piece. Once we can abate, then the demolition expense is I believe it's roughly $40,000. So we're going to collect all of the expenses associated with it, try to figure out, how we can fund what we need to do there, and then we'll come in front of the council looking for appropriation.
And then the last question or issue I have is on Bedford Street. We tore down a house less than a year ago, and I had thought the initial plan was to pave it and make it parking. I see an auction sign out there now. I don't know if that's just been put there by somebody, or are we auctioning off that piece of land now? And what has changed to change the policy, if you will, as to what you wanted to do with that little sliver of land, and what do you expect can be done with it? Whoever buys it.
I think at one point we were talking about trying to do a partnership with Habitat for Humanity on that property. I don't know that, I don't think I ever proposed paving it and using it for parking. But it is a narrow lot. We decided that there's so much, that property is particularly burdened. There's an enormous amount of past due taxes that are associated with that lot, and the expense of that was a pricey teardown for us because the whole house again had asbestos, and the asbestos couldn't be removed, from the house before we tore it down. So we literally had to treat the whole house as a waste, hazardous waste. So we've got a lot into that right now. So we're looking to auction it off. As to whether or not it's actually a buildable lot, I know that the folks have been asking the building official that. Our direction from DOR and also legal counsel is not to make any determination whether that's a buildable lot or not, because that's not something that the town should necessarily answer. So it's available. We're auctioning it off as a tax title, along with a number of other smaller parcels. That'll happen, I believe it's December 11th, right in this room. So if anybody's interested in bidding on any of those properties, they're all certainly available online.
Is there a minimum bid you're looking for that property, or how does that, I don't know if that...
There's not a minimum bid, but
Okay.
the town can reserves the right to reject any of the bids. Yep.
Thank you.
That's it. Other questions? I'm sorry, Mr. Souza, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
There's been a little concern about parking around the common, all those businesses down there. They feel that once the parking meters go in, and the students who are parking there are going to come up and park in front of their businesses for 4 or 5 hours. Are we going to be having a time limit that they can park there? And if so, is it going to be enforced like what are those signs called? Stop signs out here? Is that going to be the same kind of enforcement?
Parking enforcement is actually is pretty has been particularly rampant throughout town over the last couple of months. But there will be no paid parking in Central Square, so it won't affect any of the front of those shops at all. That'll remain timed parking, so there'll be a time limit. So that there'll be a turnover, but there won't be paid parking out there at all.
I guess I wasn't making myself clear. They're concerned about enforcement. Maybe that's how I should have put it. They're really concerned about enforcement. Okay, they don't want the students to come in and park there for 4 or 5 hours while they're in classes, because that's definitely going to have an effect on their business, especially if a number of them do it. And they're concerned about what type of enforcement, and is it going to work?
There will definitely be enforcement, I can tell you that. There has to be enforcement in order to make a paid parking system work properly. So police chief is prepared to do what he has to do to enforce parking limits throughout town, especially during the early months of the program. But I've said all along, I'm very sensitive to the fact that that it's a concern for business owners. We don't want to create gridlock. We want to make sure that business owners have a good rotation of traffic to allow people to come frequent their shops, and that's primary importance as we roll this out. So there will be enforcement.
Mr. Wood.
Thank you. I'm asking for a constituent and for my own edification. So, since we went through the admin code and the bylaws, ordinances, I don't really recall if we have strict regulations about the use of small dumpsters at residence, especially where there are college students. I can think of two locations, Stetson Street, Union Street, where in one case on Union Street, the dumpster actually sat on the sidewalk, blocking the sidewalk for the entire winter. I can understand that these houses, especially if they're renting to multiple units or something like that, have a larger than regular trash need. But is there something that the town council might do, should do, to increase the curb appeal of our neighborhoods and maybe restrict or put a setback or fencing or something else to control some of these personal dumpsters?
I would be delighted if the council wants to take a role in that. I think we do need legislation. We have brought this issue up internally, especially with the rezoning process that Councilor Columbotus has been a part of. So we are looking, we certainly will be looking to address it, at least shielding or fencing, trash receptacles and dumpsters. And you can, make it more and more stringent as you wish. But if there's a counselor that's willing to sponsor, legislation, whether it's implemented as a zoning ordinance or with as a general ordinance. Either way, I think that's the issue that the committee is sort of talking about right now, just how to address it appropriately. But I'll be happy to have any number of counselors who want to sponsor that.
Yeah, I'll sponsor something, and if you have working copy or input, that'd be good.
Good.
I've got one next to me.
Yeah.
Literally right next to me.
Who would, if you like, I would co-sponsor it. Had the problem up there.
All right, co-sponsors, Mr. Souza. And then we'll figure out the language.
Mr. Fitzgibbons.
Get something put together.
Yes, Mr. Dutton, to go back to the school building issue for a couple seconds here. The $800,000 that was voted was for a feasibility study. And are we still in that phase of the project?
Yes, we are.
Yeah, and that's being reimbursed at approximately 55%-ish, somewhere around there?
Correct.
And the state likes to play this fun game that I call hurry up and wait, or check off all the boxes and wait for us. So since the vote, we had to form a committee. The committee had to be approved by the state.
Correct.
Before the committee could meet, correct?
Correct.
Then, once the committee was formed, we had to go through a whole process of hiring an OPM that the state had to approve before we could move forward with the OPM. Correct. So we didn't have an OPM until approximately January of this year because of the state process. And don't get me wrong, I appreciate the new state process because it's going to help us avoid a Newton North. We don't want the $200 million Taj Mahal, but we have to hurry up and wait all the time. And so then the committee was meeting, and there was another deadline that we had to come up with a set of several options to submit to the state, and then the state would say, yes, those are all viable options that you're allowed to pursue, or no, go back and try again. We got the check mark that said, yes, they're all viable, correct?
Correct.
And that took us through essentially the summer, right? And now we're into the process of exploring the options that the state said was okay, right? And the committee is looking at them and weighing them and trying to understand, what's the best plan going forward for the town. We're trying to get information from everybody in the town as much as we can. We don't want any surprises. We want people to be fully informed, correct?
Absolutely.
This is why I'm asking all these questions, so that people can see it at home and understand it. And so we have a deadline coming up of sometime in February that we have another document to submit saying this is our preferred option, and the state won't get back to us until April. once we've submitted that, right? And so we don't know if we can move forward. It's a big game of Mother May I, right?
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah. So we're moving the process as fast as the state permits us, is the way I'd say it. Is that right?
I'd say, and actually I would say that we've done I won't say we because I haven't really driven it, but I think the committee's done a great job of meeting or exceeding the deadlines that we've had in front of us. So we're actually probably a few months ahead of where we otherwise would have been without that push.
Right. And so now essentially we've come down to 3 options, some type of just repair to the building, some type of an addition renovation, keeping part of the building, adding parts on, fixing the things that were broken, and then just blowing it up and starting again and building new construction. Those are the 3 options in front of us, right?
Right.
And, I don't want to put any numbers out right now because it's preliminary. But one thing that we did learn from our owner's project manager, who's been involved in many, many of these projects, is that the repair would be completely non-reimbursable by SBA, right? So if we needed to repair the building, if that was the choice that we made as a committee and recommended to the citizens of the town to vote for, we would own 100% of that, and the state would not participate in any of that.
Correct.
If we did an addition renovation or new construction, the state would participate to some degree or another in that.
Correct.
Yes.
Correct.
And so then I believe the next deadline after, getting the preferred schematic in front of the state and hopefully getting the box checked in April is we have to submit something back in June with actual hard construction numbers. And then the state waits till August to say, yes, you can go forward with this to the town for a vote.
Correct.
And then within 120 days of that, the town has to vote to accept the project or not accept the project.
Correct.
Is that correct? Yeah. And so, unlike the old days where you had a window, essentially, of funding for a school reimbursement, and you could vote no as many times as you wanted till you got a number that the town folks decided and the voters decided that they were comfortable with. Basically, because the state has worked with you so closely through this whole process, they're like, you can either vote for it or not at this point. If you don't vote for it, you've got one bite at the apple, and then we're going to walk away. And you have to start the process all over again if you want us to come back in.
Correct.
So, whatever the committee comes up with, and I'd put this out to my fellow councilors too, to make sure you guys and gals and however else you identify, are fully aware and follow along with this, because it's ultimately going to be on us to recommend some type of debt exclusion, whether it be for a non-reimbursable repair, an addition, renovation, or new construction that is partially reimbursable by the state. And if we don't vote, and that vote has to take place within 120 days of the approval by the state, so September, October timeframe. If we don't vote yes on that, then essentially we're faced with a quote-unquote Plan B, correct? And I just ask, we talked about it a little bit yesterday, but that you come up with the Plan B, which is probably essentially going to be the repair option, which we have to pay for all for ourselves, right?
Correct.
Okay, so just to set expectations, by the fall, we should be voting for a project that's been completely vetted by the school building committee here, completely vetted by the state. Everybody says it checks off all the boxes, it's the right thing to do, it's an appropriate and reasonable use of the money that we're allocating, and the state will be willing to go in for something, and then that vote will come up in September or October, and then we have to live with the consequences of it, correct?
Yep, that's correct.
Thank you.
Excellent clarification on all of that. That was Nice give and take. Thank you for that. Mr. Gallagher.
That was very good. One question, if I could ask through you to Councilor Fitzgibbons. When the committee makes a recommendation, who are they going to make the recommendation to? To the school committee or to the town?
Everything goes through the school committee.
So can the school committee decide which project, or do they have to agree with what? Who finally decides which one of those three comes to the voters for a vote? I guess it's one thing you did. That's one thing you left out.
Well, no, ultimately,
Okay.
we have to, as a school building committee, show something to the state and say, this is what we want to bring to the voters as a school building committee.
Okay.
And then the state has to say, yes, that makes sense to us too, and you can bring that forward. At that point, I would say it's just a ministerial act by the school committee and the town council to say, yes, this is the option we're going with, and yes, we're putting this on the ballot. So, I think as we start to roll into getting more and more information out, we talked about this yesterday, and I think it's a great idea that we'll have, some committee members who are on our communications committee for the school building committee come up here and give regular updates to the town council about where we are and be able to engage in dialogue.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Wood.
I know that the three options in the work of the committee is excellent, but does the budgeting process, in that process, the state reimbursement, also include hardware such as desks and chairs and other things that fill the school? Because right now, anyone that's gone through the school knows that is pretty much an empty shell. Or is that process just talking about the building itself, and then the rest would have to come later?
I'd have to defer to that. We haven't gotten that far down the line on whether FF&E, furnitures, fixtures, and equipment are part of a reimbursable expense or not, and
Okay.
how they come in. Yes, you do have to put furniture in the building.
Thank you.
Then yes, that would be part of the entire vote. But how it's reimbursable, I don't know.
Other questions for the town manager? Or Tim, as it were. Okay, excellent. Now we move on to committee reports. Mr. Wood.
The Budget and Finance Committee met tonight and recommended all of the items that are under L. I'm not sure if FinCom had a chance to meet. I'm sure we'll hear about that as we go through the items. I would like to address the question that was raised earlier about the ad hoc committee that's been formed. It was never my intention when I suggested it to replace anything that's being done by other committees. The idea is that a lot of the outcome of that work and others is going to need support of the council in the form of budget and timing and goals and anything else. And so I think the committee first needs to educate itself on what has been done in terms of the reports, the studies, get in sync with what the goals and strategy of the other work is, and then see where we can help facilitate movement in the area where the council has jurisdiction. So I think at this point it's really more a learning process and an organizational process, not an effort to replace anything else that's going on in any of the other committees. And anyone who's seen social media, I know we all have, you'll notice that every time something's brought up about the common in particular, whether to change the shape, change the location, change the width, change the building, change this, that, and the other thing, it always has, three opinions for two choices. So, it's going to take a lot of effort, and I'm hoping that the ad hoc committee can help the effort along, working with the new planner and some of the other pieces that are in place. So hopefully that addresses the question.
Any other committee reports?
Yes,
Yes,
the
Ms.
Rules and
Lois?
Procedures Committee has completed our review of the rules and procedures of the council. And we also have finalized or made our final updates to the checklist. So they are being refined by our council clerk and Mr. Dutton to just make sure that we have all the things in a row, but probably by our next meeting, we'll be able to present that back to us, and then it will be so written and make sure we get feedback from you all, but we have been doing that throughout the process, so that is it for rules and procedures.
Excellent. Anyone else? All right, moving over to L for legislation for action. And first up, FY 19-029.
I'll move to approve.
Motion made to approve.
Second.
Seconded.
I'll second. Question to,
Discussion.
do we have FinCom
Yes.
recommendation as well? Okay, thanks.
Any other discussion? Okay, those approved say
Say roll
aye.
call.
Sorry, I'm reading and talking at the same time here. Roll call vote.
Mr. Souza.
Yes?
Mr. Wood.
Yes.
Mr. Gallagher.
Yes.
Mr. Haley.
Yes.
Mr. Chase.
Yes.
Mr. George.
Yes.
Mrs. Loesch.
Yes.
Mr. Fitzgibbons.
Yes.
8 in favor, none against.
Thank you. Order O, FY 19-031, transfer order for transportation engineering services.
I'll move to approve.
Second.
Made and seconded. Discussion. Hearing none. Those in roll call vote.
Mr. Fitzgibbons.
Yes.
Mrs. Loesch.
Yes.
Mr. George.
Yes.
Mr. Chase.
Yes.
Mr. Haley.
Yes.
Mr. Gallagher.
Yes.
Mr. Wood.
Yes.
Mr. Souza.
Yes?
8 in favor, none against.
Moving to order FY 19-032, transfer order for digital document storage project. This is going to require a roll call vote as well.
I'll move to approve.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Discussion.
Discussion, a question for the town, oh, not the town manager.
He's coming in now.
He's coming in, okay.
Talk a little slower.
Question, when we were discussing this, so the account number and...
Document storage, by the way, Mr. Manager.
Document storage. The account number is unknown at this point. I think we can comfortably approve it with the expectation that finance will fill that in. Is that right?
That is correct, and actually, I've had a discussion with the finance team, and we probably in the future will not bother giving you account numbers. We'll just give you the description. The account numbers don't mean a whole lot to you at all, and you certainly don't need to vote them. So the description is more important for the council. So that's yes, but you don't need to worry about that in this.
Thank you.
Any other discussion on that? Okay. Motion was made and seconded, so roll call vote begin.
Mr. Souza.
Yes?
Mr. Wood.
Yes.
Mr. Gallagher.
Yes.
Mr. Haley.
Yes.
Mr. Chase.
Yes.
Mr. George.
Yes.
Mrs. Loesch.
Yes.
Mr. Fitzgibbons.
Yes.
8 in favor, none against.
Moving to order FY 19-033, transfer order for contractual employee sick leave buyback.
I'll move to approve.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Discussion. Hearing in Mr. Fitzgibbons.
I'd just like to the town manager, commend the finance director for having the foresight to set up an employee sick leave buyback liability so that we're able to fund it and then take the money out rather than trying to scramble and find money. That's a great financial tool for us and helps us manage the entire town budget better. So tell him he did a great job on this one.
I appreciate that.
We did make a motion that. Okay. Roll call vote.
Mr. Fitzgibbons.
Yes.
Mrs. Loesch.
Yes.
Mr. George.
Yes.
Mr. Chase.
Yes.
Mr. Haley.
Yes.
Mr. Gallagher.
Yes.
Mr. Wood.
Yes.
Mr. Souza.
Yes?
8 in favor, none against.
Excellent. Moving to order FY 19-034, rescind prior years authorized and unissued loan order debt.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none. Also a roll call vote.
Mr. Souza.
Yes?
Mr. Wood.
Yes.
Mr. Gallagher.
Yes.
Mr. Haley.
Yes.
Mr. Chase.
Yes.
Mr. George.
Yes.
Mrs. Loesch.
Yes.
Mr. Fitzgibbons.
Yes.
8 in favor, none against.
Thank you. And we move to old business. There is no old business. New business. Ordinance DFY 19-003, a zoning ordinance to amend table uses for the cultivation, manufacturing, testing of recreational marijuana, brought to us by Councilor Aisha Loesch.
Yeah, so I'm going to defer to the town manager, but the reason that this is coming up is that we don't actually have a table of uses for marijuana in town, recreational marijuana in town, so this helps create kind of the baseline for something that would need to happen in 2 years when we can actually look at zoning again from a perspective, but this is just kind of getting all of our ducks in a row that should have been done prior. And I will defer to the town manager if there's anything else you want to add.
I think that says it pretty clearly.
Okay.
We can approve, no, where do we send it?
Well, we would send that to Planning Board and CDC, the joint hearing, and we refer that to the Budget and Finance.
CDC and Planning Board?
Yes.
I'll second that.
I didn't make a motion.
I'll make a motion to
So
do that.
Mr. Wood made the motion to move that to those committees, and you've seconded
Yes.
that. Any discussion on that?
Yes.
Mr. Wood?
Thank you. The town manager had asked if anyone objected to this, and I actually wrote back an objection. The objection is based on two different things. One is I think this is unnecessary because it actually does put a limitation in. The unnecessary is that if you look at across the row, it's no's for residential areas. Now that makes sense to me. It really does. In fact, I've sponsored things similar to this that had exactly that. But in reality, who in this environment is going to ask for a license to set up anything marijuana in the middle of a residential neighborhood? No one. We're going to ask top dollar for host agreements. The licensing board at the state level is never going to approve that. The neighborhood's going to react strongly against it. It will never happen. But what we're doing here is we're actually putting no's in spots where there are no no's today, because we had at least 5 different hearings, planning board, CEDC, council, at least 5, I didn't count all of them, to reach a decision a year ago that was zoning that did not restrict items within residential. And like I said in the first place, it's no one in the right mind would ever ask for that. So I think this measure is actually not necessary at the state we are currently in, because we already reached a decision after many committee hearings and actions to set up our current zoning. Thank you.
Any other comments? Mr. Fitzgibbons?
I'd just like to hear from the town manager. The council made a decision at our last meeting or next to last meeting, I forget when, about what we wanted to do with zoning for marijuana. Why is this even coming back in front of us?
I think the best way to answer that is that the way that the council's left it, you have permitted cultivation, manufacture, and testing in town, and did not end up approving what we anticipated to be the second step, and that was limiting those uses to 2 licenses and within the Elm Street overlay. So based on some of the feedback that town attorney and I got after that meeting, our feeling was that the council probably should essentially fix what's sort of a legal gap in the zoning and identify area, at the very least, amend the table of uses so that it identifies the areas where you will permit it. Even if you send it to committee and you come back and amend it and allow it, say yes in any district, all districts, at least you've created a line in your table of uses which accommodates what you've already voted. So that's essentially the reason.
Mr. Fitzgibbons?
So I guess then to the town attorney, without a line in the table of uses, what happens?
Litigation. And you're in a situation now where there's some case law that states having nothing in the table of uses means that it's not a permitted use. However, you have a zoning ordinance that says it clearly is a permitted use. So our interpretation of that and our interpretation for the CCC when they ask us through people asking for licenses is that it's a permitted use in all the current zoning districts. So it's unclear, and I think that ambiguity needs to be addressed in some fashion. If you all believe that it should be a yes in every single district, then you should amend the table of uses to state that. If you believe it should be a yes in some, then you should amend the table of uses to state that. It's just good practice, and it's something that should be addressed at the outset of an ordinance, but you guys were dealing with a lot when you made that initial determination. I don't think this properly got put in there, though I believe there were drafts of it, but it kind of just got put to the side.
So what was the vote that we had, either the last meeting or the meeting before, around zoning for marijuana?
It was to limit the number of special permits and where these things could occur within the Elm Street Overlay District.
But we did not vote for that. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, so what's the status of our zoning after that vote and before this, and why?
All zoning districts, based on what I just.
And how many facilities?
There's no number put on it.
So we can have any number of facilities.
Correct. In any district.
In any district in town.
So this is saying not to have it.
But we can't have a retail selling to consumer shop.
Correct.
So we could have growing for wholesalers, if I could say a better term, anywhere.
Right.
Well, if that's what we decided, then that's what we decided. I don't know why we're having this discussion again, but that's just my opinion.
Mr. Haley?
You want to?
Oh,
Okay.
go ahead.
Go ahead, Ms. Loesch.
The reason is because people who live in residential areas most likely would not want those things, and while you think it might be impossible, anything is possible. So rather than not have anything written down, we should have it written down of where it's allowed and where it's not. So if we continue in our current status of where we are, we could be happening anywhere. This is a place for us to have where it should be, and this should have been done, as council already said, way prior to even talking about zoning, but alas, we did not do things in the proper order.
Mr. Wood.
Through you to the town attorney, if I could. So our vote effectively could have a use table based on what we've already voted, but it would be yes across the board.
Yeah, I mean, if that's what you all decide to amend it to and that's what you vote in, absolutely.
But that was our vote last December, and again, justified by our vote a couple meetings ago. But the second...
Is that a question, or was that just rhetorical?
That's rhetorical.
Oh, okay.
But the Elm Street overlay isn't one of these areas listed on this pattern here. Was that just an oversight?
I didn't create the use table. I'm assuming it was maybe assumed that it was in industrial A or industrial B.
It's not. We voted a specific zone.
I agree with you.
And then thirdly, so if we create a use table and we have an ERO in the use table and someone decides and is successful at putting an N in that use table that we submit, then what happens to the two licenses that Theory Wellness currently has pending?
Well, that becomes an issue. However, they'd be grandfathered because at the time that they actually applied to the CCC, the zoning ordinance allowed for them, which is why they received a letter from us stating they're in compliance with the current zoning. So that wouldn't be an issue for them moving forward. This is a prospective, any zoning ordinance is prospective. So.
Okay, thanks.
Mr. Gallagher.
I would like to see this move forward to committee, and then we can continue to have the discussion when it comes back. I think this does provide a safeguard, and I know I was a no vote on what was before us 2 or 3 meetings ago, but I admitted that the unintended consequences of it not passing, I wasn't really fully aware of. The The issue that I was bringing up was the number of licenses. My intention was not to allow it anywhere. That certainly was not my intention, and this is a safeguard to prevent that. Unfortunately, we are now in the age of marijuana, and however long all of us sit up here on this board, this issue, whether it's recreation, cultivation, manufacturing, fees and taxes and whatever, this is going to probably be with us for a while. So I think this provides a safeguard, at least temporarily, and or provides a safeguard until we can bring another zoning ordinance forward in a couple of years, or the legislation changes. So I'd like to see this at least go to committee, and
We do have a
see what we
motion
can
and a
do.
second
Yeah.
to refer it, or refer it, as it were. I'm allowed. So with that said, let's have a vote for referring it to the planning board and CEDC for the joint hearing, and refer it to Budget and Finance. Those in favor of that move?
Wait, sorry, how is it budget and finance?
No, budget.
Doesn't need to go to budget and
That's
finance.
probably the next one.
Oh, it is. Look at that. Thank you. You folks that know more of what we're doing than I do. So let's do that again for the planning board and CEDC. Those in favor of moving it to those committees, those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Against? Now we can go to resolution. Thank you, by the way. Good discussion. Our FY 19-002 fiscal year 2020 budget resolution, brought to us by that we approve, Councillor Wood.
We'll make a motion to move it to the Budget Finance Committee and Finance Committee.
There you go.
Second.
Made and
Now-
seconded.
now
Discussion.
So we had this as a discussion item for the past 3 or 4 meetings of the Budget and Finance Committee. To work out the language, we've made modifications since I first started doing this budget resolution. Years ago, it was hardline percentages, and now it's a little more flexible with some goals and some percentages of saves and top dollar numbers. So what I'm hoping is that between now and the time that it comes back, that people take a good look at it. There may be some things that folks want to change. We did have several edits during the process to get to this point. So this is the first reading of the resolution. As you know, a resolution is an opinion. It's not an order. So if there's anything that strikes you as unusual or you want clarification on, you can do that in committee. We've reviewed it several times, but there's no objection if there's concern about any of the language that's in here to make additional changes. So please take a read. You can send notes through and to the committee, and we'll move forward.
Thank you, Mr. Wood. Yes, Mr. Gallagher.
I would just ask my colleagues to please take a look at Section 5 of this order, which I do have a problem with. And I'm sure we'll have this discussion when we meet in a couple weeks, but I don't think this was put in by you, Councilor Wood. I think this was, Section 5 was put in by the finance director, I believe.
I believe so, yeah.
Okay. I'm not, so I just think we want to have a good discussion about that, and I may win the battle, lose the battle, I don't know, but I just want to ask my colleagues to take a look at Section 5. Thank you.
Mr. Fitzgibbons.
And just through you to Mr. Wood, maybe, and maybe to the town manager as well, maybe we could put this up on the town website, and anyone who wants to weigh in can certainly weigh in from the public as well, not just councilors.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
If there's no
it's
objection to doing that.
it's a
Yeah.
public document, and,
Right.
anybody else can weigh in, so
Right.
just throwing that out
And
there.
and if we do that, I don't know if we would draw attention, if I may, Mr. President. The one significant change that we made between several years ago and now, you'll notice on page 2 in Section 2, in the middle paragraph, unreserved fund balance. So the strategy changed over the years. We've achieved our goal for the stabilization fund, You heard the auditor a couple of months ago talking about the different stabilization funds and trusts that we have. So we've achieved a lot of our initial goals at creating a good, rainy day fund. It's not great if the economy completely falls apart, but we could survive a small downturn. So rather than sticking a set amount in as whatever, we're predicting a targeted amount of free cash in the percentage of a budget, and the targeted amount then would follow the policy of the free cash policy and be allocated to the different funds that were available. So it's rather than saying a hard number of $100,000 goes into a specific stabilization fund, it's based on the ability to reach our budgeted revenue numbers, to anticipate that we're going to have that 1.75 of free cash as a policy, that the free cash then triggers the financial policy, free cash financial policy, which then gets allocated to the number of capital funds, including, I think we now have 5 or 6, including allocations toward the school district. So that's the strategy behind that change, and it is a significant change. So if there are any questions, you can forward the questions on.
Mr. Fitzgibbons?
And I just note, I was reading the Beacon earlier because that's what I do when I get here early. The state has now about $2 billion in their rainy day account, and they've got $28 billion in tax revenue, so that's about 7% of tax revenue that the state is feeling like they're okay with. So.
All right. So we have a motion. Do we have a motion made to move it?
Yep.
All right. Those in favor of the move?
Aye.
Aye. Those against? Thank you. Now, resolution FY 19-003, A rights resolution.
I don't know where this would go.
I'll make a motion to refer to the Community Economic Development Committee.
Motion made
Second.
and seconded to refer
But I'd
to
like to hear from the town manager.
CEDC, but let's hear from the town manager first.
Mr. President, the Master Plan Committee has done a fair amount of work on the specifically alternative transportation methods, and I think this resolution sort of would acknowledge that the town is open and receptive to sensible alternative transportation methods that fall outside the automobile or any wheeled vehicle. So specifically, I think the council's seen and the public has seen proposals in the past for a sort of a transportation pod system, which would happen sort of above our sidewalks and streets in airspace allocated for that. There's really no specific language in state law that allows us to lease out our airspace. So this resolution would be council's acknowledgement that we're looking at different ways of doing things and open and receptive to certainly alternative forms of transportation, but also controlling and sensibly permitting what happens above our streets and sidewalks.
Mr. Fitzgibbons.
I just thank you for the clarification. I just add, when I read through it, it looks like a letter from the Master Plan Committee to the Town Council asking for action. So if it comes back forward in front of us from the CEDC, I hope the wording would be reworked to make it a Town Council resolution and not more of like a letter from the MPC. And I appreciate the info, but
right.
I don't think that's the way we want to go forward with the resolution.
Thank you for that. Other discussion before we vote to move it? Those in favor of moving to CEDC?
Aye.
Aye.
Those against? Thank you. Now we move to citizens' comments. Any citizen like to come up and say some brief words? State your name and address. even though we may know it.
And I just wanted to reiterate, we have a complete streets policy in this town, so anything that happens on Elm Street needs to follow that policy as closely as possible. And I didn't hear the town manager in his discussion, and I haven't seen the maps, but I think that complete streets element, that's one place in town we can really, really make that operate well. As to Mr. Fitzgibbon's last comment, as chair of the master plan, how else are we supposed to put things before you? We are advisory to the town. Should we have sent the letter to the chair? Should we have sent the letter to the town manager? We chose the town manager because that's who brings things forward, and he did it on our behalf. So I'd like a little more clarification down the road, not tonight, as to exactly how committees are to get recommendations and advisory things before this council. Thank you.
I'll talk to you right after the meeting. Okay. I can talk to you as we're walking out. It's really quick.
Any of the other one of you have anything to say? Okay, no more council comments, citizens' comments rather. Now we move to council comments. And I'll start on the left.
I'd just like to thank the state rep for coming out tonight and making himself available for citizens and our questions. And I think it was productive, and hopefully he hears what the town's thinking.
Thank you, Ms. Loesch.
Yes, I would also like to extend my thanks. I'm also looking forward to our parade and Christmas on the Common on Sunday. So, yeah. It's December this Sunday, so I hope, right? It's December. So thank you all who put that together. I'm looking forward to marching and spending the afternoon in town. And I hope everyone had a great Thanksgiving.
Mr. George.
So I'd like to reiterate, thank you for Representative D'Amelia. Hopefully we can do this on a somewhat consistent basis, either annually or every 6 months. And hopefully as we get this cadence down, we get more public input for questions and things of that nature as well. Unfortunately, I will not be in town for Christmas on the Common. We had a family wedding, but it looks like the weather's going to be great. And if last year was any indication of the people that come out and the success of the parade, I think it's going to be a great time. So march well.
Mr. Chase.
I also am looking forward to Christmas on the Common, and I hope that everyone had a safe and fully enjoyable Thanksgiving holiday, and we're in the throes of the holiday season now, full force, so let's bring it on. Looking forward to it.
Cheerful. Mr. Gallagher.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to Sunday. I'm sure we'll all be marching. I do have the banner. If you want me to bring the banner with me,
Not all of us, by the way.
You're not going to be there? You're not going to be, all right. But I hope everybody comes out Sunday. They do a lot of work putting that program together on Sunday. And I want to thank our state rep for coming in to answer some questions. It's good to see that questions back and forth. And we'll see you 1 week from tonight.
3 weeks break. Quick meeting turnaround. Yes. I too want to thank the state rep for coming in. I agree with Mr. George that having that happen periodically so we can touch base with what's happening at the state level is important to our process as well. And I think everyone had good questions, put them on the spot a couple times, which is probably a good thing. He really does help the town. I want to thank the Lions for putting up the decorations. This is the first time in like 10 years that I could not participate. I was out of town for the event, but I did drive by a couple times. It looks pretty good. And then I unfortunately will be out of town for Christmas on the Common, so I will not be able to join you marching, but have a lot of fun. Thanks.
Mr. Souza.
Councilman Dennis, it looks like you and I are the only two people, so we'll have to carry the banner. We keep hearing about the Christmas on the Common and the parade. Now, what I'd like to know is who can tell me where it's kicking off from and at what time?
The parade starts at the old high school parking lot. The new middle school parking lot.
Yes.
So we'll meet.
Also, for the second year, there will be a Christmas parade that will start at the Bridgewater Rainham Regional High School at the end of the common to drop Santa and Mrs. Claus off at our event. Perfect. Okay, so since I'm speaking,
Great segue.
which I thank you, which I don't often do around these tables. So Christmas is coming. People are accepting packages, and hopefully they're staying dry and getting everything they need for Christmas. Just be careful when you move things. I was moving furniture last night, and a really nice gash in my head, and it's been aching this whole time right now. People at home, be careful when you're moving things. Great experience with having the state rep in here. I was hoping for some good questions and back and forth, and that was nice that he was willing to do that and had some decent answers. And I really think we put him to task on a couple of things. So we should be hearing some news from him sometime in the future, coming back from the State House. Looking forward to the Christmas parade that I'll be a part of, Christmas in the Common. So there will be 3 or 4 of us. We'll do well. We'll all hold the sign together.
5,
Be 5.
3, 4, 5.
Excellent.
Maybe Tim. I don't know.
All right. Well,
We'll be waiting.
that is it for my comment. Now we do have an executive session tonight. So executive session, we can entertain a motion to move the executive session under MGL Chapter 30A, Section 21A2, to conduct strategy sessions in preparation for negotiations with non-union personnel or to conduct collective bargaining sessions or contract negotiations with non-union personnel.
So moved. Second.
Roll call vote.
Okay, roll call vote to move to executive session.
Did your motion include to adjourn from executive session?
Yes.
Yes. Thank you.
Move to adjourn.
No,
No.
no.
No?
Oh,
Nope.
don't do that.
Mr. Fitzgibbons?
Yes.
Mrs. Loesch?
Yes.
Mr. George?
Yes.
Mr. Chase?
Yes.
Mr. Haley?
Yes.
Mr. Gallagher?
Yes.
Mr. Wood?
Yes.
Mr. Souza?
Yes.
8 in favor, none against.